Welcome to Christ's Word, where everyday lives meet the light of God's Word. Here, we don't preach. We tell stories. Moments of doubt, turning points, quiet revelations, all woven with raw emotion and unshakable faith. There are moments when you pray, and no one hears. Days when you cry, and no one sees. You whisper, "God, are you still there?" And then He answers. Not with thunder. Not with lightning. But with a small bird, carrying a grape in its beak. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a true story. About a man who lost everything. And how God provided for him, in the most unexpected way. Listen closely. Because maybe, this is the answer you've been waiting for. He had nothing left. No money in his wallet. No bread in his kitchen. No family to call. And not a single promise from life that things would ever get better. The wind howled through the thin walls of his cheap rental room. The ceiling light flickered, casting a trembling shadow of a man hunched by the window. His name was Elias. He once had a small business. A wife. A modest house. An old but reliable car. And a quiet belief that if he worked hard enough, he'd be okay. Then one day, everything collapsed like a black flood. COVID. Job loss. Debt. His wife walked out, taking their 5-year-old son. He lost it all. There were mornings Elias couldn't get out of bed. Not because he was tired. But because he saw no reason to stand. There were nights he stared at the ceiling, gripping the only fruit knife in the house, then letting it fall from his trembling hand, swallowed in tears. Why would God allow this? He used to pray. He had trusted. He gave to his church. He helped the homeless. He did everything people said was right. And now, he was the one in need. He remembered the verse his mother used to read every morning. Do not worry about your life. Look at the birds of the air, they do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Matthew 6 verses 25 to 26. Birds. Elias let out a dry, bitter laugh. Birds don't sow or reap, but Elias did. He had worked 16-hour days. Why wasn't he fed? No one knocked at his door. No miracles arrived. He stood and opened the window to the cold night wind, not for relief, but to feel something, anything, that would prove he was still alive. Then, a harsh croak cut through the silence. A crow landed on his window ledge. In its beak, something small, round, glistening in the dim streetlight. A grape. Elias blinked. The bird tilted its head, as if waiting. Then, it dropped the grape and flew off into the dark. He stared at it, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Was it a joke? A strange coincidence? The next morning, he opened the window again. He didn't know why. Maybe just habit. But this time, 2 birds came. One was a small, golden sparrow. The other, dark and sleek, unlike any bird he'd seen before. Each carried a crumb of bread, and dropped it on the windowsill before flying away. He didn't pick it up right away. He just sat there, still. His mind swirled in a storm of doubt and trembling hope. God, is this you? There was no booming voice. No heavenly light. Just a whisper, deep in his soul. God, let me see the depth of your unchanging love. He started opening his Bible each morning. Not to find answers. But to find life. He began whispering prayers the moment he opened his eyes. Start your day thanking God. Even when you don't feel thankful. The birds kept coming. Day after day. He told no one. Who would believe it? That God was feeding him, with birds. Until one day, he noticed something stranger than the miracle itself. It wasn't just the food. It was the precision. 7:03 a.m., every single morning. Not a minute off. And not just any birds. Each day, they were species he'd never seen in his city, rare, striking, like something out of a nature documentary. For the first time, Elias shivered. Not from cold, but from the fear of a man about to understand something too holy, too vast. God wasn't just feeding him. God was teaching him something. Something he didn't yet have words for. But one thing was certain, he couldn't stay silent anymore. And just at that moment, a noise echoed from the stairwell. A man's voice, calling his name. A voice he hadn't heard in years. Elias stepped to the door, opened it, and looked down. The man standing there had died 2 years ago. He didn't move. Elias stood in the doorway, frozen, hands still on the knob, eyes wide and unblinking. The man before him looked just as he remembered, denim jacket, dusty boots, that tired but mischievous smile. Tom. The name came out like a cough. Like a memory choking its way back into the present. "Hey, man," Tom said casually, like he'd just stepped out for coffee and not, died 2 years ago in a car crash on Route 86. I went to your funeral," Elias whispered. "I know," Tom said, eyes softening. "I was there." Elias backed up, heart pounding. His knees threatened to give way. "This isn't real. This is a hallucination. I haven't eaten enough, I'm sick, You're not hallucinating." Tom stepped inside, uninvited but somehow, expected. He smelled of cedar and clean earth, like rain after drought. Elias sat down on the edge of his mattress, not trusting his legs. "Why are you here?" he asked, voice thin. Tom looked around the room, hands in his pockets. "You prayed for a sign." Elias's eyes darted to the window. Empty. No birds today. "I didn't pray for you. You prayed to see that God hasn't forgotten you." Tom turned and met his eyes. "He hasn't." Silence. Only the sound of Elias's shaky breath, and the groan of old pipes in the walls. "Okay," Elias said, licking dry lips. "Let's say I believe you're real. Why would God send you?" Tom chuckled, warm but sad. "Because I knew you when you still believed. When your faith wasn't something you measured in outcomes, but carried like fire in your chest. I'm not that person anymore." Tom crouched in front of him. "That's why I'm here." Elias stared at his hands, calloused and cracked from months of odd jobs. The shame curled in his stomach like a sleeping animal. "You don't know what I've done." Tom didn't flinch. "You don't know what God has forgiven." That stopped him. "I don't need comfort," Elias said. "I need food. Rent. A job. I need something real." "You think the birds were imaginary?" Elias looked at the window again. It felt empty now without them. Quiet in a way that echoed too loud. "I think maybe I'm losing my mind." Tom stood. "Then maybe it's time to lose it." Elias frowned. "What?" Tom paced the small room. "Lose the mind that tells you God only loves you when you succeed. The one that measures God's presence by how full your fridge is. Lose the mind that expects miracles but can't recognize mercy in the form of crumbs." Elias's throat tightened. "Do you remember the widow Elijah was sent to?" Tom asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah. She had nothing left but a little oil and flour. God multiplied it. Why her? Why not a rich merchant in town? Why not send Elijah to someone who could host him in a palace?" "I don't know." Tom stopped pacing. "Because God wanted Elijah to witness a miracle in the emptiest place. And he wanted that widow to know, she was seen. Not forgotten. Not too poor to be loved." Elias felt tears rise behind his eyes. He hated crying in front of people, even if they were dead. "I don't have oil," Or flower, he muttered. Tom smiled. You've got a window. And birds. For a moment, Elias laughed through his tears. It felt wrong and right at the same time. Then Tom grew serious again. You've got to leave this room. Elias blinked. What? Pack what you need. God's calling you into the next thing. Next what? I don't have anywhere to go. Tom nodded slowly. Not yet. But he'll show you. The way will appear when your feet start moving. Elias stared at the chipped tiles on the floor. The thought of leaving terrified him. Out there, the world was cruel. Expensive. Hungry. And if I fail again? You won't. You can't know that. I do. Tom placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. It was solid. Real. Warm. Because God doesn't abandon the ones he's still using. The sun had risen without Elias noticing. Pale light spilled through the window, golden and gentle. He felt something deep in his chest shift. Like a door slowly creaking open. He didn't understand it all. He still didn't know where he'd go. But for the first time in months, he didn't feel entirely alone. Where will I go? He whispered. Tom's voice softened. Where the birds are waiting. Then Elias blinked, and Tom was gone. No goodbye. No flash of light. Just, gone. The room fell silent again, but it no longer felt empty. Elias stood. Slowly. Carefully. As if his bones remembered how to carry faith. He gathered the few things he had, a worn Bible, a second-hand jacket, a half-used notepad. The room looked the same, but something in him had changed. He hesitated at the door, hand on the knob. Then he heard it, that familiar cry. He turned. Outside the window, perched on the ledge, was a single rare bird. Sleek feathers. Sharp eyes. In its beak, not food. Not bread. But a folded piece of paper. Elias opened the window. The bird stared at him, then dropped the note. He caught it mid-air. Unfolded it with shaking hands. 4 words, scribbled in handwriting he hadn't seen in years, but knew by heart. Trust me. Walk forward. He looked up. The bird was gone. He didn't look back. Elias stepped out of the apartment with nothing but a small bag slung across his shoulder and a folded piece of paper pressed against his chest like a shield. He had no destination. No plan. Just those 4 words echoing like a heartbeat. Trust me. Walk forward. The city was loud in ways he had forgotten. Cars rushed past, horns blared, conversations buzzed like static. People were moving somewhere, with purpose, with shoes that didn't have holes and coats that didn't stink of damp. Elias walked slower than them all. Not because he was unsure, but because every step felt sacred. Every footfall whispered. God, let me see the depth of your unchanging love. He didn't know where to go. But he knew he couldn't stay where he'd been. So he walked. Block after block. His stomach growled by noon, and the ache behind his eyes throbbed from the bright sun. But still he walked. It wasn't until he reached the edge of the industrial district, abandoned warehouses, rusted fences, graffiti and silence, that something inside him paused. A memory. Distant. Faint. This place. He used to work nearby. Years ago. Back when his hands were steady and his wallet had weight. Back when life still made sense. There was an old bakery on the corner. Or there had been. He turned. It was still there. Broken window. Door slightly ajar. Sign hanging by one chain. Eli's Bread and Light. His old friend's place. A man who had offered Elias a job once, before Elias turned it down in pride. Because back then, Elias thought he could do better. He stood in front of the door now, hesitating. It looked empty. Abandoned. Still, his hand pushed the door open. Inside, dust coated every surface. Shelves were bare. The air smelled of time and yeast long gone. But in the middle of the room stood a single table. On it, a small loaf of bread. Still warm. He stared at it, heart pounding. No one was around. No sound of ovens. No scent of baking. Just the quiet miracle of enough. He took a step forward. Another. Then sat at the table and broke off a piece. It steamed in the air like breath. Soft. Real. As he chewed, tears pooled in his eyes. He hadn't eaten since Tuesday. And yet this tasted like more than food. It tasted like mercy. He whispered. "Thank you, God. I don't deserve this. But you give anyway." A door creaked in the back. Elias turned sharply. A woman appeared. Maybe 50. Skin dark and weathered, eyes sharp as winter. She didn't speak at first, just looked him over like someone who'd seen too many strangers, too many stories, too many needs. "You eating that?" she asked flatly. He nodded. She didn't scold. Didn't ask him to leave. Instead, she walked to the counter, pulled up a second chair, and sat across from him. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. Elias chuckled. "I think I did." She didn't blink. "That so?" He studied her face. Something about her felt familiar. Not in features, but in spirit. Solid. Weathered. Worn by storms but not broken. "You own this place?" he asked. "I take care of it," she said. "Owner died a while back." "Eli?" She nodded. "Heart attack. Quick." Elias swallowed. Another name lost. Another door closed. "I used to know him," Elias said. "I figured," she said, eyes softening slightly. "You've got that look, the kind that's seen hope fall through cracks." He lowered his gaze. "I'm just looking for something. Aren't we all?" Then she leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You've got a calling, don't you?" Elias blinked. "What?" "A calling," she repeated. "God's chasing you. That's why your life got stripped bare." His lips parted, but he had no words. She continued. "God doesn't call the full. He calls the empty. You hear me?" He nodded slowly. "What's your name?" she asked. "Elias." She smiled, as if that confirmed something she already suspected. "Well, Elias, this bread wasn't meant for just anyone. You were sent here." He looked down at the last piece. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do next," he whispered. The woman stood. Went to the back. Returned with a worn book, a leather-bound journal, pages yellow and edges curled. She placed it in front of him. This was Eli's. He wrote in it every day for 20 years. Dreams. Prayers. Names of people he helped. Elias touched the cover gently. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because your name's in it." He looked up. Her voice softened. "Last year. 1 week before he died. He wrote, 'One day, Elias will come back. Hungry. Not just for bread. Feed him. Then send him to the river.'" Elias's breath caught. He flipped through the pages, found the note. His name. The date. The instructions. It didn't make sense. How could Eli have known? But the moment he read those last 3 words, "to the river," something inside him shifted again. That door, half open before, swung wide. He looked at the woman. "What river?" She smiled. You'll know it when you see it. He closed the journal. I can't repay you for this. She shrugged. You weren't supposed to. He stood, tucking the book under his arm, his heart pounding in rhythm with something eternal. Outside, the sky was deepening into orange. The sun lowering like a final bow. He stepped out. The air smelled different now. And from far off in the distance, just barely, he heard the cry of a bird. Elias followed the sound. It wasn't a normal bird call. Not the squawk of a city pigeon or the high-pitched flutter of sparrows. This was deeper, clearer, almost melodic. Foreign. Like something out of a dream. He turned left at the end of the block, then right, his feet moving faster than his thoughts. The noise came again, closer now. And then he saw it. Perched on the edge of a rusted street lamp, staring directly at him, was a bird unlike any Elias had ever seen. Not large, not small, but striking. A deep blue throat, shimmering black feathers, and wings that pulsed with life. It didn't move. Just watched. Unblinking. Unafraid. Elias slowed. You, calling me, he whispered, feeling ridiculous. The bird tilted its head. Then launched into the air with a single graceful flap, and began to glide down the street. He followed. He didn't know why. Didn't know where it was leading him. He only knew this, something sacred was happening. Every step buzzed with purpose. Every breath felt borrowed. The bird flew low, always just ahead, pausing on ledges, rooftops, fences, then lifting off again. As if checking to make sure he was still coming. As if guiding him on a path already written. And Elias obeyed. God, I don't know what's waiting for me, he whispered, but let me trust the mystery of your provision. The sun had nearly vanished when the bird finally stopped, on a wooden post at the edge of a narrow walking trail. A worn path. Overgrown grass. Soft earth beneath his shoes. And ahead, water. A river. It wasn't wide. It wasn't majestic. But it moved with quiet strength, cutting through the landscape like a soft whisper in a harsh world. The kind of place you'd never find unless something, or someone, brought you to it. The bird let out one last cry and soared into the trees. Elias stood still, heart thudding. The river murmured gently. Something inside him broke loose. He dropped to his knees. Not from exhaustion. Not from hunger. But from the overwhelming weight of presence. God. You brought me here, he breathed. I don't deserve to be led. But you lead me anyway. His voice cracked. Tears fell. He stayed like that, kneeling, breathing, weeping quietly by the river's edge, until darkness wrapped around him. Then he heard it again. Wings. A rustle behind him. Not 1. 2. 3. 4. When he turned, he didn't see one bird. He saw 3. Each perched along a low branch, no more than a few feet away. Silent. Watchful. He held his breath. Then, as if choreographed, one of them hopped forward, wings outstretched, and dropped something at his feet. A fig. Elias blinked. Another bird flapped down. A second gift. Bread. Not a full loaf. Just a piece. Torn. But fresh. The scent unmistakable. The third followed. Something shiny. He leaned in. A coin. Old. Maybe valuable. Maybe not. But enough to trade. Enough to buy one more day. He sat there, surrounded by birds and river and night, completely undone. He picked up the bread. Warm. Real. He bit into it, then bowed his head. God. You fed Elijah in the desert with ravens. And now you feed me. You never stopped being the God who provides. The birds didn't leave. They lingered. As if keeping watch. As if part of the miracle. Elias stayed by the river that night. The journal lay open beside him, and by the light of the moon, he read entries from a man long gone, a man who had once prayed for Elias by name. One passage caught his eye. Provision isn't always rain from heaven. Sometimes it's fruit from a tree you never planted. Bread left by birds you never raised. Coins you didn't earn. God humbles before he honors. Starves before he feeds. He strips away the known to show you how little you ever needed it. Elias closed the book, hand trembling. This wasn't just survival. It was anointing. He hadn't been abandoned. He'd been chosen to see God in a way few people ever do. Not through sermons. Not through comfort. But through the quiet thunder of providence. The next morning, the birds were gone. The bread was gone. But Elias woke with a peace so complete, it silenced every fear still clinging to him. The ache in his body didn't matter. The emptiness of his pockets didn't matter. He was full. He whispered. Start my day thanking you, God. Not because I have much, but because you are enough. And then, he heard footsteps. A man approached. Tall. Bearded. Work clothes. Dirt on his hands. You camping here? He asked. Elias nodded slowly. The man studied him. I saw birds bringing you food last night. Elias blinked. You saw them? I did. 3 of them. Same ones that fed my father when he lost everything. Elias stared. The man took a step closer. You're the one, aren't you? The one he prayed for. Elias stood. Your father was Eli. The man nodded. I've been watching this trail ever since he died, the man said. He told me someone would come. Someone hungry. Not just in the belly, but in the soul. Elias's throat tightened. The man extended his hand. Come with me. We've got work to do. Elias hesitated. He looked at the river one last time. Then to the trees. Then to the sky. No birds. Just wind. But that was enough. He took the man's hand. And stepped into a future still unwritten, but no longer unknown. The man's name was Caleb. He didn't talk much on the walk back. Neither did Elias. There was no need for words. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was alive. Like something sacred was breathing just beneath the surface. Like the silence itself was part of the message. They arrived at a small clearing, just beyond the trees. A modest cabin stood in the center. Not much to look at. Weather-beaten. Slanted roof. Smoke rising from a crooked chimney. But it smelled like warmth. Like bread. Like refuge. Come inside, Caleb said. Elias stepped over the threshold and felt it, peace. A kind of peace he hadn't known in years. Not comfort. Not ease. But stillness. The kind that silences the storm inside you even if the world outside is on fire. He sat at a worn wooden table while Caleb poured him a cup of something hot. The aroma was earthy. Healing. Caleb set it down without a word, then sat across from him. My father wrote about you often, he finally said. Elias looked up. He said one day, a man would come who had lost everything, even his belief in God's provision. A man who would need to be fed not just with food, but with truth. Elias swallowed hard. He said you'd show up just before the second drought. Elias blinked. Second. Caleb nodded. There was a drought back then, when my father lost his land. The one where the birds came. But he always said another one would come. A deeper one. Not of the land, but of the soul. Elias stared into the cup in his hands. "That's the one I've been in," he whispered. "A drought inside me. I didn't even realize how dry I was until I had nothing left to lose." Caleb nodded slowly. "That's usually when God moves." There was a long pause. Then Elias said something he hadn't said in years. "God, let me see the depth of your unchanging love." Caleb smiled faintly. "That's the prayer my father used to whisper every morning." Elias felt something shift inside. A small crack in the wall he'd built around his faith. Light was getting in. They spent the next hours in quiet labor. Carrying firewood. Fixing parts of the cabin. Cleaning the nearby well. The physical work didn't erase Elias's questions. But it gave him room to breathe. To feel. To begin again. Days passed. Each morning, Elias woke up before the sun, stepped out into the misty clearing, and whispered the same thing. "Start my day thanking you, God, even if I don't know where it's going." Each day, something small happened. A fig fell from a tree. A rabbit crossed his path, meat for the fire. Rain came suddenly, filling the barrels that had been dry for months. Not miracles loud enough for headlines. But gentle. Personal. Exact. Like God wasn't just watching him, but walking with him. One evening, Caleb took Elias to a small wooden box tucked in the corner of the cabin. Inside, dozens of old journal pages. Worn. Faded. "My father's prayers," Caleb said. He wrote down every promise he clung to. Elias picked one at random. The handwriting was shaking near the end, but the words still sang. "Faith is not trusting God for what you want. It's trusting God when He gives you what you need, even when it hurts." Elias closed the box, heart pounding. He had been asking for rescue. But maybe God had been trying to reshape him. Maybe the stripping away of everything wasn't punishment. Maybe it was preparation. One night, as he sat by the fire, Elias asked Caleb, "Why didn't your father ever come looking for me himself?" Caleb didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "Because he trusted the birds more than he trusted his own hands." Elias frowned. "My father once told me, if God could feed Elijah in the wilderness, if he could feed me through crows, then I don't have to chase miracles. I just have to wait for the man they're meant for." Elias felt tears gather in his eyes. The birds hadn't just been signs. They were messengers. Sent by a faith passed from one man to another, across decades. It was never random. Never luck. It was providence. That night, as Elias lay staring up at the ceiling of the old cabin, listening to the quiet creak of wood and wind, he whispered, "I see it now, God. The drought wasn't just around me. It was in me. But you. You never left. You never stopped feeding me. Even when I didn't have the eyes to see it." There was a knock at the door the next morning. Unusual. People didn't come out here. Caleb opened it slowly. A woman stood there, weathered coat, anxious eyes. Behind her, a boy about 12, holding a cracked water jug. "Our well's dry," she said quietly. "They told me your father used to help folks." Caleb glanced at Elias. Then stepped aside and said, "Come in." And just like that, Elias understood. This wasn't just about his survival. It was about others. People were coming. The drought was spreading. But so was the call. He wasn't just a man fed by birds anymore. He was becoming a provider himself. A vessel. A branch. And even now, the birds were circling again. Not to feed him this time. But to show him where to go next. Elias stood at the edge of the forest, watching the boy carry water. His steps were slow. Careful. Not because the jug was heavy, but because the boy knew the weight of what it held. Life. And Elias, he remembered. He remembered when he used to carry dreams that way, afraid they might spill. Afraid someone might laugh at how little he had. Afraid God might not come through. But that fear, it had begun to die. Day by day. Flame by flame. It hadn't vanished with thunder or parted clouds. It had melted, quietly, in the presence of truth. And now that truth had grown roots. Every morning, people showed up. They didn't say they were lost. They didn't cry out for help. Most of them just stood there. Hungry. Tired. Waiting for someone who remembered how to hope. And Elias? He didn't preach. He just worked. He hauled buckets. Planted beans. Repaired walls. He shared the journals of Caleb's father. He told them stories, not about success, but about survival. Not about wealth, but about faith. Stories of a man who once prayed, "God, let me see the depth of your unchanging love," and then nearly drowned in that love when everything else was taken away. One evening, as the fire cracked low and the boy, whose name was Micah, sat next to him peeling sweet potatoes, Elias asked quietly, "Do you know why you came here?" Micah shook his head. Elias smiled. "I didn't either. Not for a long time." There was a long pause. Then Micah said, "I think God knew my mom was tired. So he brought her to someone who remembers what tired feels like." Elias felt his throat tighten. The next morning, the birds returned. Not the ones who had fed him before, these were smaller, faster. But they carried something too. Movement. Direction. They flew in circles, then dipped low and soared out toward the hills. It was the same pattern they'd flown the day Elias first collapsed in the canyon. Caleb stepped out of the cabin behind him. "You see it?" Elias nodded. "They're calling you." Elias didn't move. Behind him, the clearing had turned into a tiny village, a flickering miracle. People had planted seeds. Children ran barefoot. Laughter echoed where silence once ruled. He had become part of something. And now, he was being asked to leave it. "They're not done with you yet," Caleb said softly, as if reading his thoughts. Elias looked down at his hands. Calloused. Weathered. Stronger than they'd ever been. "I'm not ready," he said. Caleb gave a gentle smile. "No one ever is. That's why he sends birds." That night, Elias didn't sleep. He walked to the edge of the woods again and knelt in the dust. "God, if you're really sending me, let me go with more than just courage. Let me go with love. And please, don't let the people I leave behind forget that you were always the one feeding them. Not me." At sunrise, he packed a bag. Light. Micah tried not to cry. Elias knelt in front of him and whispered, "You're strong. You know why?" Micah shook his head. "Because you're not waiting to be rescued anymore. You're already becoming a rescuer." He placed one of Caleb's father's old journals in the boy's hands. "Start your day thanking God," Elias said. "Even when the ground is dry." Micah nodded. His mother hugged Elias tight, not the way someone hugs a stranger, but the way you hold a part of your healing. And then Elias turned. And walked toward the hills. Toward the direction of the birds. Toward whatever came next. He didn't know where it would lead. Maybe another village. Maybe another drought. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He understood now. God didn't promise ease. He promised presence. He didn't promise riches. He promised daily bread, enough for the moment, enough to keep going. And sometimes, he sent that bread in the beak of a crow. That was enough. It had always been enough. As Elias disappeared into the rising sun, a feather floated down behind him, black, iridescent, soft. Micah picked it up and held it in his small hands. He didn't know what kind of man he would become. But he knew one thing for sure. If God could send birds to feed a broken man in the wilderness, then surely, he could use him, too. Even if he was small. Even if he was young. Even if he was still learning. God would provide. He always had. He always would. If this story stirred something in your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Take a moment, right now, to like this video, subscribe to Christ Word, and share it with someone who might be wandering through their own desert. Here on Christ Word, we believe stories rooted in faith can change lives. And we know that your story matters, too. So tell us in the comments. What part of Elias's journey spoke to you most deeply? And what kind of story or Bible truth would you love to see us bring to life next? We read every single comment. And who knows, your suggestion might just become the next video. If you're feeling dry in this season, if your faith feels far away, remember, God will provide. Not always in the way we expect, but always in the way we need. So come back next week. We're just getting started. There are more stories to tell. More hearts to heal. More deserts to walk through, together. Until then, keep praying. Keep trusting. And start your day, thanking God. This is Christ Word. See you soon.